Digha Nikaya 1, Brahmajāla Sutta, the all-embracing net of views.
DN1, Brahmajāla Sutta, the all-embracing net of views, DI1, Bodhi, Thinasaro. In this important sutta, the first in the Tipitaka, the Buddha describes 62 philosophical and speculative views concerning the self and the world that were prevalent among spiritual seekers of his day. In rejecting these teachings, many of which thrive to this day, he decisively establishes the parameters of his own.
This is the translation from the Pali by Bhikkhu Bodhi.
I taught on wanderers, Paribhajaka Katha. 1. Thus have I heard. On one occasion the Exalted One was traveling along the highway between Rajagaha and Nalanda together with a great company of bhikkhus, with about 500 bhikkhus. At the same time the wanderer Suppuya was also traveling along the highway between Rajagaha and Nalanda together with his pupil, the youth Brahmajāla. Along the way, the wanderer Suppuya spoke in many ways in dispraise of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. But his pupil, the youth Brahmajāla, spoke in many ways in praise of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Thus these two, teacher and pupil, followed closely behind the Exalted One and the company of bhikkhus, making assertions in direct contradiction to each other. 2. Then the Exalted One together with a company of bhikkhus entered the royal rest house in the Ambalithika garden in order to pass the night. The wanderer Suppuya together with his pupil, the youth Brahmajāla, also entered the royal rest house in the Ambalithika garden in order to pass the night. There, too, the wanderer Suppuya spoke in many ways in dispraise of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, while his pupil Brahmajāla spoke in many ways in their praise. Thus these two, teacher and pupil, dwell together making assertions in direct contradiction to each other. 3. When dawn broke a number of bhikkhus, after rising, assembled in the pavilion. As they sat together, the following conversation sprang up among them. It is wonderful and marvelous, friends, how the Exalted One, he who knows and sees, the Worthy One, the perfectly enlightened Buddha, has so thoroughly penetrated the diversity in the dispositions of beings. For this wanderer Suppuya spoke in many ways in dispraise of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, while his own pupil, the youth Brahmajāla, spoke in many ways in their praise. These two, teacher and pupil, followed closely behind the Exalted One and the company of bhikkhus, making assertions in direct contradiction to each other. 4. Then the Exalted One, realizing the turn their discussion had taken, entered the pavilion, sat down on the prepared seat, and addressed the bhikkhus. What kind of discussion were you holding just now, bhikkhus? What was the subject of your conversation? The bhikkhus replied, When dawn had broken, Lord, after rising we assembled in the pavilion. As we sat here, the following conversation sprang up among us. It is wonderful and marvelous, friends, how the Exalted One, he who knows and sees, the Worthy One, the perfectly enlightened Buddha, has so thoroughly penetrated the diversity in the dispositions of beings. For this wanderer Suppuya spoke in many ways in dispraise of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, while his own pupil, the youth Brahmajāla, spoke in many ways in their praise. These two, teacher and pupil, followed closely behind the Exalted One and the company of bhikkhus, making assertions in direct contradiction to each other. This, Lord, was the conversation we were having when the Exalted One arrived. 5. If, bhikkhus, others speak in dispraise of me, or in dispraise of the Dhamma, or in dispraise of the Sangha, you should not give way to resentment, displeasure, or animosity against them in your heart. For if you were to become angry or upset in such a situation, you would only be creating an obstacle for yourselves. If you were to become angry or upset when others speak in dispraise of us, would you be able to recognize whether their statements are rightly or wrongly spoken? Certainly not, Lord. If, because, others speak in dispraise of me, or in dispraise of the Dhamma, or in dispraise of the Sangha, you should unravel what is false and point it out as false, saying, for such and such a reason this is false, this is untrue, there is no such thing in us, this is not found among us. 6. And if, because, others speak in praise of me, or in praise of the Dhamma, or in praise of the Sangha, you should not give way to jubilation, joy, and exultation in your heart. For if you were to become jubilant, joyful, and exultant in such a situation, you would only be creating an obstacle for yourselves. If others speak in praise of me, or in praise of the Dhamma, or in praise of the Sangha, you should acknowledge what is fact as fact, saying, for such and such a reason this is a fact, this is true, there is such a thing in us, this is found among us. 2. The analysis of virtue. 1. The short section on virtue, Sila. 7. It is, because, only to trifling and insignificant matters, to the minor details of mere moral virtue, that worldling would refer when speaking in praise of the Tathagata. And what are those trifling and insignificant matters, those minor details of mere moral virtue, to which he would refer? 8. Having abandoned the destruction of life, the recluse Gautama abstains from the destruction of life. He has laid aside the rod and the sword, and dwells conscientious, full of kindness, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. It is in this way, because, that the worldling would speak when speaking in praise of the Tathagata. Or he might say, having abandoned taking what is not given, the recluse Gautama abstains from taking what is not given. Accepting and expecting only what is given, he dwells in honesty and rectitude of heart. Or he might say, having abandoned unchaste living, the recluse Gautama lives the life of chastity. He dwells remote from women, and abstains from the vulgar practice of sexual intercourse. 9. Or he might say, having abandoned false speech, the recluse Gautama abstains from falsehood. He speaks only the truth, he lives devoted to truth, trustworthy and reliable, he does not deceive anyone in the world. Or he might say, having abandoned slander, the recluse Gautama abstains from slander. He does not repeat elsewhere what he has heard here in order to divide others from the people here, nor does he repeat here what he has heard elsewhere in order to divide these from the people there. Thus he is a reconciler of those who are divided and a promoter of friendships. Rejoicing, delighting, and exulting in concord, he speaks only words that are conducive to concord. Or he might say, having abandoned harsh speech, the recluse Gautama abstains from harsh speech. He speaks only such words as are gentle, pleasing to the ear, endearing, going to the heart, urbane, amiable, and agreeable to many people. Or he might say, having abandoned idle chatter, the recluse Gautama abstains from idle chatter. He speaks at the right time, speaks what is factual, speaks on the good, on the Dhamma and the discipline. His words are worth treasuring. They are timely, backed by reason, definite and connected with the good. 10. Or he might say, the recluse Gautama abstains from damaging seed and plant life. He eats only in one part of the day, refraining from food at night and from eating at improper times. He abstains from dancing, singing, instrumental music, and witnessing unsuitable shows. He abstains from wearing garlands, embellishing himself with scents, and beautifying himself with unguents. He abstains from accepting gold and silver. He abstains from accepting uncooked grain, raw meat, women and girls, male and female slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and swine, elephants, cattle, horses and mares. He abstains from accepting fields and lands. He abstains from running messages and errands. He abstains from buying and selling, and from dealing with false weights, false metals, and false measures. He abstains from the crooked ways of bribery, deception, and fraud. He abstains from mutilating, executing, imprisoning, robbery, plunder, and violence. It is in this way, because, that the worldling would speak when speaking in praise of the Tathagata. 2. The intermediate section on virtue, Brahmajāla. 11. Or he might say, whereas some honorable recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, continuously cause damage to seed and plant life, to plants propagated from roots, stems, joints, buddings, and seeds, the recluse Gautama abstains from damaging seed and plant life. 12. Or he might say, whereas some honorable recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of stored-up goods such as stored-up food, drinks, garments, vehicles, bedding, scents, and comestibles, the recluse Gautama abstains from the use of stored-up goods. 13. Or he might say, whereas some honorable recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, attend unsuitable shows, such as shows featuring dancing, singing, or instrumental music, theatrical performances, narrations of legends, music played by hand-clapping, cymbals, and drums, picture houses, acrobatic performances, combats of elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, goats, rams, cocks and quails, stick fights, boxing and wrestling, sham fights, roll calls, battle arrays, and regimental reviews, the recluse Gautama abstains from attending such unsuitable shows. 14. Or he might say, whereas some honorable recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, indulge in the following games that are a basis for negligence. 1. Atrapada, a game played on an 8-row chessboard. Desapada, a game played on a 10-row chessboard. Akaza, a game of the same type played by imagining a board in the air. Paraharapatham, hopscotch, a diagram is drawn on the ground and one has to jump in the allowable spaces avoiding the lines. Santika, spellikins, assembling the pieces in a pile, removing and returning them without disturbing the pile. Kalika, dice games. Fashika, hitting a short stick with a long stick. Salikohatham, a game played by dipping the hand in paint or dye, striking the ground or wall, and requiring the participants to show the figure of an elephant, a horse, etc. Aka, ball games. Pangasira, blowing through toy pipes made of leaves. Vankaka, plowing with miniature plows. Moklasika, turning somersaults. Sangulika, playing with paper windmills. Patalaka, playing with toy measures. Rataka, playing with toy chariots. Dunyuka, playing with toy bows. Akarika, guessing at letters written in the air or on one's back. Mansika, guessing others' thoughts. Yadavaja, games involving mimicry of deformities. The recluse Gautama abstains from such games and recreations. 15. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of high and luxurious beds and seats, such as spacious couches, thrones with animal figures carved on the supports, long hair coverlets, multicolored patchwork coverlets, white woolen coverlets embroidered with flowers, quilts stuffed with cotton, woolen coverlets embroidered with animal figures, woolen coverlets with hair on both sides or on one side, bedspreads embroidered with gems, silk coverlets, dance hall carpets, elephant, horse or chariot rugs, rugs of antelope skins, choice spreads made of katli deer hides, spreads with red awnings overhead, couches with red cushions for the head and feet. The recluse Gautama abstains from the use of such high and luxurious beds and seats. 16. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of such devices for embellishing and beautifying themselves as the following: rubbing scented powders into the body, massaging with oils, bathing in perfumed water, kneading the limbs, mirrors, ointments, garlands, scents, unguents, face powders, makeup, bracelets, headbands, decorated walking sticks, ornamented medicine tubes, rapiers, sunshades, embroidered sandals, turbans, diadems, yak-tail whisks, and long-fringed white robes. The recluse Gotama abstains from the use of such devices for embellishment and beautification. 17. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in frivolous chatter, such as, talk about kings, thieves, and ministers of state, talk about armies, dangers and wars, talk about food, drink, garments, and lodgings, talk about garlands and scents, talk about relatives, vehicles, villages, towns, cities, and countries, talk about women and talk about heroes, street talk and talk by the well, talk about those departed in days gone by, rambling chit-chat, speculations about the world and about the sea, talk about gain and loss. The recluse Gotama abstains from such frivolous chatter. 2. 18. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in wrangling argumentation, saying to one another, you don't understand this doctrine and discipline. I am the one who understands this doctrine and discipline. How can you understand this doctrine and discipline? You're practicing the wrong way. I'm practicing the right way. I'm being consistent. You're inconsistent. What should have been said first, you said last. What should have been said last, you said first. What you took so long to think out has been confuted. Your doctrine has been refuted. You're defeated. Go, try to save your doctrine, or disentangle yourself now if you can. The recluse Gotama abstains from such wrangling argumentation. 19. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in running messages and errands for kings, ministers of state, Kalyas, Brahmins, householders, or youths, who command them, go here, go there, take this, bring that from there. The recluse Gotama abstains from running such messages and errands. 20. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in scheming, talking, hinting, belittling others, and pursuing gain with gain, the recluse Gotama abstains from such kinds of scheming and talking. 3. It is in this way, because, that worldling would speak when speaking in praise of the Tathagata. 3. The long section on virtue, Mahasila. 21. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of livelihood, by such debased arts as, 4. Prophesying long life, prosperity etc., or the reverse, from the marks on a person's limbs, hands, feet etc., divining by means of omens and signs, making auguries on the basis of thunderbolts and celestial portents, interpreting ominous dreams, telling fortunes from marks on the body, making auguries from the marks on cloth gnawed by mice, offering fire oblations, offering oblations from a ladle, offering oblations of husks, rice powder, rice grains, ghee, and oil to the gods, offering oblations from the mouth, offering blood sacrifices to the gods, making predictions based on the fingertips, determining whether the site for a proposed house or garden is propitious or not, making predictions for officers of state, the knowledge of charms to lay demons in a cemetery, the knowledge of charms to cure one possessed by ghosts, the knowledge of charms to be pronounced by one living in an earthen house, the snakecraft, for curing snake bites and charming snakes, the poison craft, for neutralizing or making poison, the scorpion craft and rat craft, for curing scorpion stings and rat bites, respectively, the bird craft and crow craft, for understanding the cries of birds and crows, for telling the number of years that a man has to live, the knowledge of charms to give protection from arrows, reciting charms to understand the language of animals. The recluse Gotama abstains from such wrong means of livelihood, from such debased arts, 22. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of livelihood, by such debased arts as interpreting the significance of the color, shape, and other features of the following items to determine whether they portend fortune or misfortune for their owners: gems, garments, staffs, swords, spears, arrows, bows, other weapons, women, men, boys, girls, slaves, slave women, elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, cows, goats, rams, fowl, quails, lizards, rabbits, tortoises, and other animals. The recluse Gotama abstains from such wrong means of livelihood, from such debased arts. 23. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of livelihood, by such debased arts as making predictions to the effect that the king will march forth, the king will not march forth, our king will attack and the enemy king will retreat, the enemy king will attack and our king will retreat, our king will triumph and the enemy king will be defeated, the enemy king will triumph and our king will be defeated. Thus there will be victory for one and defeat for the other. The recluse Gotama abstains from such wrong means of livelihood, from such debased arts. 24. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of livelihood, by such debased arts as predicting, there will be an eclipse of the moon, an eclipse of the sun, an eclipse of a constellation. The sun and the moon will go on their proper courses. There will be an aberration of the sun and moon. The constellations will go on their proper courses. There will be an aberration of a constellation. There will be a fall of meteors. There will be a sky blaze. There will be an earthquake. There will be an earth roar. There will be a rising and setting, a darkening and brightening of the moon, sun, and constellations. Such will be the result of the moon's eclipse, such the result of the sun's eclipse, and so on down to such will be the result of the rising and setting, darkening and brightening of the moon, sun, and constellations. The recluse Gotama abstains from such wrong means of livelihood, from such debased arts. 25. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of livelihood, by such debased arts as predicting, there will be abundant rain, there will be a drought, there will be a good harvest, there will be a famine, there will be security, there will be danger, there will be sickness, there will be health, or they earn their living by accounting, computation, calculation, the composing of poetry, and speculations about the world. The recluse Gotama abstains from such wrong means of livelihood, from such debased arts. 26. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of livelihood, by such debased arts as arranging auspicious dates for marriages, both those in which the bride is brought in from another family and those in which she is sent out to another family, arranging auspicious dates for betrothals and divorces, arranging auspicious dates for the accumulation or expenditure of money, reciting charms to make people lucky or unlucky, rejuvenating the fetuses of abortive women, reciting spells to bind a man's tongue, to paralyze his jaws, to make them lose control over his hands, to make them lose control over his jaw, or to bring on deafness, obtaining oracular answers to questions by means of a mirror, a girl, or a god, worshipping the sun, worshipping Mahabrahma, bringing forth flames from the mouth, invoking the goddess of luck. The recluse Gotama abstains from such wrong means of livelihood, from such debased arts. 27. Or he might say, whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of livelihood, by such debased arts as promising gifts to deities in return for favors, fulfilling such promises, demonology, reciting spells after entering an earthen house, inducing virility and impotence, preparing and consecrating sites for a house, giving ceremonial mouthwashes and ceremonial bathing, offering sacrificial fires, administering emetics, purgatives, expectorants and phlegmagogues, administering medicine through the ear and through the nose, administering ointments and counter-ointments, practicing fine surgery on the eyes and ears, practicing general surgery on the body, practicing as a children's doctor, the application of medicinal roots, the binding on of medicinal herbs. The recluse Gotama abstains from such wrong means of livelihood, from such debased arts. These, bhikkhus, are those trifling and insignificant matters, those minor details of mere moral virtue, that worldling would refer to when speaking in praise of the Tathagata.
That's the end of the first part of the Digha Nikaya 1, the Brahmajāla Sutta, all-inclusive net of views, the Great Net. The section on moralities. Now it will go on to the section on views. So that's the end of the first part.